Story 1. I would do my job. I would ask him for written authorization from the chief executive officer, since the friend is not an employee with proper clearance. I would ask the chief executive officer to personally approve this, and I would keep it as a record if he insisted on the access. Otherwise, the friend can leave. Story 2. I would say he needs to talk it over with the information technology director. I do not even have access to all of the systems, which is why any good information technology department practices least user privilege. Story 3. I'm calling my boss. They'll probably call their boss too. And the only way I'm doing anything that's under my control is if I get it in writing and signed by basically the entire chain of command above me. Story 4. I do information technology security for banks. The chief executive officer's friend would not have been able to just walk through the door in the first place unless he was physically escorted by the chief executive officer, as he would need an access card to get in. Even then, I would ask for a ticket to be logged to grant them access, even if the chief executive officer was literally standing over me telling me to do it. I would not even accept an email as authorization, as that is pretty much right out of the Fisher's playbook. Official ticket logged into the change request system, and authorized by the people who are allowed to authorize such things, of which the chief executive officer is not one of them. The chief executive officer would need to go and lean on the chief technology officer or information technology director to expedite it, and even then we would generally only grant read-only access. The whole point of a process like this is so that no one can do an end run around it. It's all about audit trails and accountability. Story 5. I would say no. Then I would cite legal reasons for protecting my data. Then I would go to lunch and avoid that person and the chief executive officer. Then I would probably get fired, but I have been fired for more foolish reasons. Story 6. If some random person claiming to be the chief executive officer's friend came to me, I would say no. But if I was called into the chief executive officer's office and he told me to give his friend or contractor whatever he needed, then I would give him whatever access he needs. I am there to fulfill a role which is beholden to the shareholders, board, and leadership. Granting access is part of my day-to-day responsibilities. It is on someone else, such as the chief executive officer, to approve the access request in writing or through a task management system. It is on the security team and legal team to deny the request. I'm just a button pusher with no say. This is not the same situation given that your question is political in nature, in something that should be a federally regulated position beholden to congressional approvals, not presidential. And Department of Justice security clearances depend. Story 7. And that's not imaginary. I had a 20-year career in information technology as one of the gatekeepers, and I turned away access many times, receiving all sorts of threats for doing it. Didn't care. I've turned down executive-level people before, even when they threatened to fire me, knowing I was doing my job and wouldn't actually be fired. These were companies I trusted to do the right thing. I'm certainly not suggesting any government worker should trust what anyone in the Trump administration is going to do. I wouldn't care if Elon Musk himself approached me with threats. I'd tell him to go away. Story 8. Where I work, I would pick up the phone and dial 55555, which would get me the security office. Then I would tell them I had an intruder in my office claiming to be the chief executive officer and demanding access to classified information. That should do it. Generally, my line manager does not have access to what I am working on. Currently, he is also my program manager, but when he is not on my programs, he does not get access either. Story 9. Tell him that I cannot authorize that access. If he has gone through human resources background checks and is on board as an employee and the chief executive officer tells me to give him access, that's another story. But if the guy just strolls in off the street, I am going to tell him to leave. And I would not worry about being fired. I will find something else. Any information technology team worth working for is not going to view you negatively for not following proper security policy. And in my case, the law, because I work with protected data. Story 10. I am being paid to do my job. If I can confirm that my chief executive officer is telling me to do something, then that falls in my job description. Give the man the data. Story 11. Nope. Every single company has rules about information technology usage and security. Handing over your credentials and giving access to your system may result in termination. Get me something written, preferably an email chain with the chief executive officer, my boss, and the head of cybersecurity. Until then, nope. Story 12. I would tell them it's illegal, and if my chief executive officer would insist, I would remind them that the fines for a severe general data protection regulation violation are up to 20 million euros, or in the case of a business, up to 4% of their total global turnover of the preceding fiscal year, whichever is higher. Then, if they would fire me, there would be no solid ground, so I would probably win in labor court and get a very big severance pay. My country is far from perfect, but we're pretty lucky regarding labor laws. Story 13. I would tell that idiot that he had better bring the chief executive officer so he can personally either fire me or instruct me to do as I am told. Otherwise, he can kick rocks, and I would not have to give him any reason why. Story 14. Oh, a penetration test? How cute. The answer is no, unless you have a signed letter from the chief executive officer and you have arranged for me to call them from my phone at an arranged time so that I can confirm the letter is legitimate. And the chief executive officer tells me the prearranged code word so I know their voice is not being mimicked by artificial intelligence. In fact, maybe forget all that and have the chief executive officer come to my office to confirm your authorization personally. I would still want it written down and signed before acting on it. Story 15. My chief executive officer's husband came to pick her up one night. I had never met the man. He was knocking on the door, wanting to come in and wait. I said, "Nope, sorry, I don't know you, and I'm not interrupting her meeting. You can wait in the car." I never heard a word about it. Story 16. The answer would be no without written authorization to set aside established security policy. Also, the answer might still be no even with that written authorization, because federal and state laws prohibit it for some of our systems. Yes, I will make them fire me for refusal if I'm being asked to commit a felony. I would also call the police from the parking lot. New York and the United States of America can fight over who charges whom with what when. My second call would be to an employment lawyer. Story 17. Ask them to make a ticket. I'd even offer to create the ticket for them. Access requests come via an access request ticket and must be approved by my manager and information security. I can't do anything without that ticket and the corresponding approval. But once I have that, I don't care, I'll give Bigfoot admin access if it's approved. Story 18. No ticket, no work. Jokes aside, there are protocols for accessing managed data. These can vary by department as well as client expectations. This results in situations where the chief executive officer doesn't even have access to all the data. So the reality is, if this were to happen, I would need express written consent from the chief executive officer. I would then need to pass it off to legal, who would review our contractual obligations and, if necessary, get an amended contract to deal with the variance. This is, of course, an extreme case. If somebody moves to a new project or department, we can clear access with the manager of the department and function under the assumption that a manager's approval means the paperwork is in place. However, this would be like allowing access to a new share. That said, full unrestricted access isn't a thing, and nobody is installing a hard drive, thumb drive, or setting up rogue servers on our network. Story 19. Not my data. You don't got it. If it's approved by my chief executive officer, you can do whatever you want. I'll just give the warnings and risks, but that's not my decision to make. Story 20. I commented about this recently. Our systems have a strict role and permission system. The chief executive officer or a consultant working for him can be granted viewer or auditor access, meaning that they can view the master data, transaction data, logs, etc. This is very common. We're audited multiple times per year by financial auditors, insurance companies, cybersecurity audits, internal audits, etc. But anyone asking for admin access will be laughed out of the room. The only people who have privileged access to the systems are the actual administrators, and they can only modify master data, but not initiate any payments or transfers. All payment processing requires multiple approvals. If you want to transfer money, there's a whole process required, and any payment that exceeds 100,000 will require at least 5 different approvals. And everything is logged in the audit trail. International accounting and tax laws ensure that it's impossible to bypass these measures. Basically, any intelligently designed information system should not allow people to bypass the approvals for payment, and those should enforce an 8 eyes or more review and approval process. Story 21. Musk is not acting as Trump's friend. He was legally assigned an official job as a member of the executive branch of the United States government. Trump heads the executive branch of the United States government and has the authority to execute that authority within the law and at his discretion. Without Dogecoin, we are circling the drain due to unsustainable debt. The federal bureaucracy's unchecked power is contrary to the United States Constitution and needs to be checked. Story 22. I do my best not to burst out laughing, then ask to see written authorization. If he had it in writing, I would call the chief executive officer to confirm. This is at minimum. Story 23. I had a somewhat similar situation happen before. The General Information Technology Department wanted access and control of a critical system, which was not going to happen at a nuclear plant. I remember them being handed a bunch of older punch cards and being told that when they figured that out, they could ask again. Guess what? They never asked again. Story 24. This goes against every proactive security email my company has sent out. You're testing me. I am not going to give you access to anything without the chief executive officer in person and legal in person here. Then they need to explicitly email me while I watch them type and send with a carbon copy to my personal email to grant access, or I will lose my job. Story 25. Without hearing anything from the chief executive officer first, I would say that I'm sorry, I don't have any record of you or permission to give you access to anything. They just need to have the chief executive officer reach out to me to clear this up. But until I get something official from the chief executive officer, I can't grant access to unauthorized users. Story 26. Have him take a seat until I have written orders from my chain of command. Then do as ordered. That said, they will not get my access. They would be granted accounts of their own with access rights defined by their role, with the proper vetting, verification, and training. No one in my organization truly has full access. Story 27. Ask him to provide proof of his security clearance, and then whether he has been read into the need to know. If not, sorry, no can do. My clearance isn't worth losing because you're a friend of the guy that runs the place. Get your clearance, get read into the projects, and then you can have access. Story 28. The answer is no without proper tracking, a ticket for a paper trail, and authorization. Since this person appears to not be an employee, I would require either legal to provide the contract that defines their working relationship and a request from human resources to onboard. If they're a troublemaker, I would follow appropriate procedures to handle the situation in a professional manner. Story 29. I would point him towards infrastructure, as I literally don't have access to production in either case, and most businesses work that way. If I were in charge and had access, I would call the chief executive officer while he was there and confirm if they're expected. If the chief executive officer confirms he's expected, I give him access and then go back to browsing Reddit. Probably not the answer you wanted, but it's the actual answer. If security and/or the chief executive officer say to give access, you give access. You aren't liable for the company's decisions, and even if you suspect it's unlawful, you would have to jump through whistleblower hoops because the moment you try to prevent access, the chief executive officer could very well have you physically removed from the premises, and I've seen that happen personally. He would also likely revoke your own access as well, so good luck trying to whistleblow with proof after that. Additionally, you don't own any of the data in the company, so you have no rights to it in either case. If the chief executive officer tells you to delete every file and system on the network, guess what? You delete every file and system on the network because he'll just go find the next person in line who will. Finally, you might ask, but does it ever happen when people suddenly show up and demand access? Yes. Either because we have penetration testers coming in, we have compliance teams coming in, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or we have third parties coming in for some kind of integration. Story 30. I would happily tell him to gargle my hairy balls, and if he didn't like it, I would slap him. If he complained, I would remind the chief executive officer that I have a lot of dirt on him in an encrypted drive that will be made public if anything happens to me. This is all hypothetical, right? Story 31. Well, my company's information technology policy is to not share login credentials. So assuming they legitimately have the permission to do that, I'll just log off, shut down my computer, and it's all theirs. There is a basic input-output system password, again per policy, and the drive is encrypted, but I don't own my work computer, so they're welcome to it. Not sure what they're going to do with an encrypted drive, and policy prevents me from sharing my credentials. I'd then text my boss and let him know the authorities took my computer and I'd need a new one to do my work.